What drives a sister to murder? What makes someone you shared childhood with, someone you survived trauma alongside, become your worst nightmare? Tonight, we are diving into one of Russia's most shocking cases in sibling rivalry turned deadly. February 2016, Saint Petersburg, Russia. A 17-year-old aspiring model lies dead in her apartment, 189 knife wounds, eyes brutally removed, ears severed, nose cut off. The killer, her own sister. This is the story of Stefania and Elizaveta Dubrovina, two sisters who survived an abusive childhood together, only for one to destroy the other in the most brutal way imaginable. To understand this tragedy, we need to go back to the beginning. The Dubrovina family was pure dysfunction. 7 children, one overwhelmed mother, Oksana, a father who had vanished, possibly murdered. Oksana Dubrovina ruled her household with an iron fist and physical punishment. The children lived in fear. Violence was the language of their home. One incident stands out. An older brother beat his younger sister so severely with a belt that she was hospitalized for a month. The reason? She refused to clean her room. Local administrator Alexander Gogolkin knew the family well. Initially, we didn't notice any problems, he said. The children were well groomed, and neighbors assured us they had a close family. But then it turned out that violence reigned in their home. Oksana bragged about raising the children with physical punishment. When Stefania turned 14 and Elizaveta 16, they made an extraordinary decision. They went to court against their own mother. They accused her of abuse and demanded to be placed in foster care. The court sided with the sisters. Oksana Dubrovina was stripped of her parental rights. Think about that for a moment. 2 teenage girls, children, had to take legal action against their own mother just to escape the violence at home. But this wasn't the end of their suffering. It was just the beginning. In the children's home, the sisters' personalities began to crystallize. Stefania was vibrant, outgoing, beautiful. She had dreams of modeling and fame. Elizaveta was quieter, more withdrawn, already showing signs of mental instability. But even in the orphanage, trauma followed them. Elizaveta suffered a head injury, a traumatic brain injury that required hospitalization. Doctors prescribed medication. The side effects, psychiatric illness, hallucinations began. The seeds of madness were planted. After finishing school, Stefania enrolled in college to study as a secretary referent. She lived in a dormitory and devoted all her free time to photo shoots. She dreamed of becoming a model. She wanted to stand on her own feet and live independently. Her career was taking off. The same couldn't be said for Elizaveta's. Elizaveta was completely unpopular. She desperately tried to imitate her sister, copying Stefania's hair color, makeup, and mannerism, but success remained elusive. Stefania, on the other hand, became a fairly well-known figure in Saint Petersburg party scene. She participated in various publicity stunts with Stas Beratsky, formerly of the band Leningrad. She was gaining recognition, making connections, building a life. At 17, Stefania was living in a studio apartment on Pulkovskaya Street. But she wasn't alone. She was living with Alexei, a 42-year-old man, 25 years older than her. Why would a teenage girl choose to live with a man old enough to be her father? The answer lies in her traumatic past. After years of abuse, abandonment, and institutional care, Stefania craved stability, security, someone who could provide for her. Alexei represented everything her chaotic childhood had lacked: a roof over her head, financial support, a chance to focus on her modeling career without worrying about survival. But this relationship came at a cost. Her mother, Oksana, was disgusted by the arrangement. From age 15, they started dating older men, and problems began. She said, "I knew that sooner or later this would end the way it ended." The age gap raised questions that were never properly investigated. Stefania's social media pages were filled with proactive photos. She was a minor, yet no one seemed to care about the older man in her life. This is where we see the system failing vulnerable children. Stefania had escaped one form of abuse, only to potentially enter another. But she saw it as freedom, as her ticket to a better life, and Elizaveta watched it all from the shadows. Elizaveta watched her sister's success with growing resentment. The sisters had once been close. In the orphanage, they were like best friends. Back to back, they fought with the others, their mother remembered, but success changed everything. Elizaveta's mental health was deteriorating. The medication from her brain injury, the hallucinations, the constant comparison to her successful sister, it was a toxic combination. Jealousy is a poison ivy that grows in the darkness, and in Elizaveta's mind, that poison was spreading. She had been seeing a psychiatrist. The warning signs were there, but no one could predict what was coming. February 23rd, 2016, Defender of the Fatherland Day in Russia. Stefania and Alexei were celebrating in their apartment on Pulkovskaya Street. The evening was peaceful until Elizaveta arrived. She seemed agitated, upset. She said she needed to talk to her sister about something important. The three of them sat around the table, drinking, talking. Then Elizaveta made a request. She wanted Alexei to go buy more alcohol. Alexei was reluctant to leave, but Elizaveta was persistent. Finally, he agreed. He grabbed his coat and headed to the store, leaving the two sisters alone. What happened next would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Because when Alexei left that apartment, he was leaving Stefania alone with her killer. But there is something chilling about this moment. Elizaveta didn't just happen to have a knife, she came prepared. This wasn't a crime of passion, this was premeditated murder. Earlier that day, Stefania had received a phone call from Stas Beratsky, the showman she worked with professionally. Something was deeply wrong. Beratsky later recalled the conversation with haunting clarity. She was crying, he remembered. I asked what happened, but she couldn't really explain anything. I understood that she had problems. This wasn't just casual distress. Stefania was genuinely frightened about something, but she couldn't or wouldn't tell Beratsky what was happening. Was she already sensing danger from her sister? Had there been threats? We may never know. In a chilling coincidence, Stefania herself had posted a photo on social media the day before the tragedy. In the image, she held a bottle of wine and a large knife. Was it a premonition of her own death or just a tragic twist of fate? Alexei was gone for about 15 minutes. As he returned to the building, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Screaming. Stefania's voice echoing through the stairwell. He ran to the apartment on the 18th floor. The door was locked from the inside. He pounded on it, called out. No response. A neighbor heard the commotion and came to help. Together, they tried to break down the door. For 15 agonizing minutes, they fought to get inside. Then, suddenly, the door opened. Elizaveta burst out of the apartment. She ran past the man down 18 flights of stairs. Alexei chased after her while the neighbor called police. Inside the apartment, investigators found a scene from hell. Blood covered every surface. The walls, the floor, the bed where Stefania's body lay. What Elizaveta had done to her sister defies comprehension. The medical examiner counted 189 stab wounds, but this wasn't the worst of it. Stefania's eyes had been brutally removed. Her ears had been cut off. Her nose had been severed. This wasn't just murder. This was mutilation. This was rage incarnate. Stas Beretsky, who had worked with Stefania professionally, was shocked when he learned the details of her murder. As someone with experience in the funeral industry, he worked in morgues and cemeteries. He questioned the official version of events, whether through crime scene photographs, forensic reports, or his connections in the funeral business. Beretsky had seen evidence of the brutal attack. His professional experience with death made him skeptical. There was such a hole in the body, he said. You couldn't make such a hole. I worked for a long time in the cemetery. I spent days and nights in the morgue. I saw corpses. It's impossible to inflict such damage in a short time, especially with a table knife. But Beretsky wasn't just commenting on the wounds. He was building a theory that would challenge everything investigators believed about the case. Elizaveta was caught at the entrance to the building. Alexei held her until police arrived. She was covered in her sister's blood, but her story kept changing. First, she claimed she couldn't remember what happened. Then, she said she had felt sick and blacked out. Later, she would claim something even more bizarre. According to her lawyer, Mikhail Latoshenko, the investigation was straightforward. There are three main people involved, he said. Elizaveta, her sister, and the cohabitant. The evidence was overwhelming, but Elizaveta's defense team had a strategy. They would claim she was mentally ill, unfit to stand trial, not responsible for her actions. For almost a year, Elizaveta sat in jail, denying everything. She filed complaint after complaint. She demanded that investigators test her blood for drugs and toxins. She wanted security camera footage from the building. She requested her psychiatric records. Most tellingly, she challenged the psychiatric evolution that found her mentally competent. She complained that phenobarbital was found in Stefania's blood. She demanded that the pizza and cutlets on the table be tested for poison. She was determined to be declared insane. And for a while, it worked. In August 2017, Elizaveta was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. She had convinced the system that she was too mentally ill to stand trial. For 2 years, she received treatment, but the doctors eventually concluded she was fit to face justice. This is where the case takes another disturbing turn, because Elizaveta didn't just kill her own sister. She tried to manipulate the system to escape justice. She played the victim while her sister lay dead. When the case finally went to trial in 2019, it was held behind closed doors. The reason: medical confidentiality. Elizaveta's psychiatric treatment had to be kept private. But the facts spoke for themselves. The physical evidence, the witness testimony, the medical examiner's report. Elizaveta presented one final, desperate version of events. She claimed she had come to visit her sister and Alexei. They were sitting at the table. Suddenly, she felt sick. When she came to, everything was red. Her sister was laying on the floor, and standing over her, Alexei, with a knife, looking like a demon. A demon. That's what she called him. The man who had loved her sister. The man who tried to save her. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Elizaveta couldn't accept responsibility for what she had done. The court wasn't buying it. On October 18, 2019, Elizaveta Dubrovina was sentenced to 13 years in prison. When Judge Nataya Grafova asked if she understood the verdict, the 22-year-old simply nodded. No remorse, no emotion, just a silent acknowledgement of her fate. Her lawyer didn't even show up for the sentencing. Neither did any family members. She was alone, just as she had left her sister to die alone. Even after the conviction, the family's dysfunction continued. Oksana Dubrovina, the mother who had lost her parental rights, refused to believe her daughter was guilty. When I read the news about the murder on Pulkovskaya Street, they hadn't written who killed whom yet, but I immediately knew it was them, she said. But then she contradicted herself. I'm sure she didn't kill Stefania. She insisted she was just a witness. Oksana painted a picture of Stefania as troubled. She claimed her daughter paid for her own photo shoots, that she wasn't a real model, that her association with Stas Beretsky was degrading. When she got involved with Stas Beretsky, I asked her directly, "Aren't you ashamed to be Beretsky's whore?" She just brushed me off, but others saw it differently. Beretsky himself believed there might be more to Stefania's death. He suspected she might have been involved with dangerous people, criminal elements, that maybe this wasn't just sibling rivalry. She was friends with many criminal personalities, he said. I have suspicion that Stefania wasn't killed by her sister, Elizaveta, but that it was ordered. Escort or not escort, prostitution, not prostitution. She had everything. She got into all the heavy stuff. But the evidence tells a different story. This wasn't a contract killing. This wasn't organized crime. This was something much more personal, much more tragic. The Dubrovina family's dysfunction didn't end with Stefania's murder. It continues to this day. 4 of Oksana's older children have essentially rejected their mother. Another son recently petitioned to have her parental rights revoked. Social worker Tatiana Volnyats knew the family well. They live seemingly well. The house is modest but clean, she said. There are no problems with alcohol or drugs. The children are well groomed, dressed, fed. Oksana constantly takes them on trips to the sea. You can't say she doesn't care about them. But there is a dark side. Violence is an integral part of upbringing. Volnyats continued. The murder of Stefania was discussed in front of the younger children, and the terrible details were not hidden, as if as a warning. Oksana recently pulled her 12-year-old daughter out of school for homeschooling. She openly talks about needing to beat the libido out of the girl. The pattern is repeating. Local administrator Irina Matash is concerned. Even though 3 children asked to be taken from Oksana to an orphanage, it's very difficult to take the others away from her, even through court. Of course, it's better for a child to be with their mother, but not in this case. The most chilling aspect of this case isn't just the brutality, it's the premeditation. Elizaveta came to that apartment with a knife. She deliberately sent Alexei away. She created the perfect opportunity to strike. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was calculated murder. What drives a sister to kill? Experts point to several factors in the Dubrovina case: childhood trauma, abuse, mental illness, and most powerfully, envy. Both sisters had survived the same horrific childhood, but they had processed it differently. Stefania used her trauma as motivation. She was determined to build a better life, to escape her past. Elizaveta, on the other hand, was consumed by what she didn't have. She watched her sister succeed while she struggled. She saw Stefania's beauty, her confidence, her independence, and she wanted it for herself. When imitating her sister's appearance didn't work, when trying to follow in her footsteps failed, the envy turned to rage, and rage turned to murder. The brain injury and the psychiatric medication may have lowered her inhibitions, but the motive was clear. She couldn't stand to see her sister succeed where she had failed. Today, Elizaveta Dubrovina is serving her 13-year sentence in a Russian prison. Her appeal was denied. She will likely remain behind bars until 2029. The Dubrovina family continues to fracture. Other siblings have petitioned to have their mother's remaining parental rights revoked. The cycle of dysfunction continues. Stefania's dreams of modeling and fame died with her at the age of 17. Her photos remain on social media, a digital memorial to a life cut short, a reminder of what might have been. Alexei, who tried to save her, has largely disappeared from public view. The trauma of that night, of hearing the woman he loved being murdered, is something he'll carry forever. He was the one who had to see her mutilated body. He was the one who caught her killer. He was the one who had to live with the knowledge that he had left her alone with a monster. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family, about the bonds that are supposed to protect us, about what happens when love turns to rage, when protection becomes predation. The Dubrovina sisters survived an abusive childhood together. They fought the system together. They escaped their mother's violence together. But in the end, Elizaveta became the very thing they had tried to escape. She became the abuser, the destroyer, the monster. And Stefania, who had fought so hard to build a better life, who had escaped poverty and abuse, who was finally finding success and independence, couldn't escape her sister's jealousy. Some questions remain. Was Stefania really involved with criminal elements, as Stas Beratsky suggested? Was there more to her relationship with older men than just seeking stability? Did the system fail her by not investigating the adults in her life? We may never know the full truth, but what we do know is that a young woman with dreams and potential was brutally murdered by the person who should have protected her, her own sister. The 189 knife wounds tell a story of rage that goes beyond normal human emotion. This was hatred in its purest form, envy that consumed everything in its path, love twisted into something unrecognizable. Cases like this remind us that envy doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people closest to us, the people who know our vulnerabilities. On my opinion, what really happened that night, after studying this case extensively, I believe I understand what truly happened in that apartment on February 23rd, 2016. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry. This wasn't simple jealousy over looks or success. This was about business, about money, about competition in a world where both sisters are trying to survive. The evidence is overwhelming that both sisters were involved in escort work. Their mother's own statements, the nature of their photographs, their relationship with older men, the way they paid for their own photo shoots. In this world, Stefania was more successful. She had better clients, more money, a stable living situation with Alexei, everything Elizaveta wanted but couldn't achieve. I believe Elizaveta came to that apartment with a specific plan. She had been watching her sister's success for months, seeing Stefania's growing client base, her financial independence, her escape from their shared trauma. The fact that she brought a knife proves premeditation. The fact that she specifically asked Alexei to leave shows planning. She created the perfect opportunity to eliminate her competition. What happened in those 15 minutes was the explosion of years of suppressed rage. But it wasn't just about jealousy, it was about business rivalry taken to its most extreme conclusion. The mutilation, the removed eyes, the severed ears and nose. These weren't random acts of violence. They were symbolic. She was destroying the tools of Stefania's trade, the beauty that had brought her clients, the face that had made her successful. I don't believe Alexei was involved in any way. He was a victim too, manipulated into leaving so that Elizaveta could commit her crime. His genuine shock and immediate pursuit of the killer prove his innocence. In the end, Elizaveta didn't just kill her sister, she killed her business partner, her only ally in this dangerous world, the only person who had ever truly understood her pain. And that perhaps is the most tragic part of this story. What do you think happened that night? Let me know in the comments below. Stefania Dubrovina was just 17 years old when she died. She had survived poverty, abuse, and abandonment. She was building a life for herself, creating her own path, but she couldn't survive her sister's jealousy. The tragedy is that both sisters were victims of their upbringing. Both had been damaged by their mother's violence. Both had been failed by the system, but only one chose murder. If you are struggling with jealousy, with mental health issues, with family trauma, please seek help. Don't let these feelings consume you. Don't let them turn you into something you are not. And if you are in an abusive situation, whether it's family, friends, or romantic partners, remember that there are people who can help, ways out. You don't have to suffer in silence. The Dubrovina family's cycle of violence continues. Younger children are still at risk. The system that failed Stefania and Elizaveta is failing their siblings. But maybe by telling this story, by understanding it, we can prevent others like it. Maybe we can break the cycle. Maybe we can choose a love over hate, protection over destruction, life over death. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this story so it doesn't die. Take care of each other and stay safe. Goodbye.